Hello, Venetia.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Venetia Porter, you are a curator of Islamic and contemporary Middle East art at the British Museum, where you curated several exhibitions such as Word into Art, Artists of the Middle East in 2006, and Hajj, Journey to the Heart of Islam in 2012. You were also the lead curator for the Al-Bukhari Foundation Gallery of the Islamic World at the British Museum in 2018. And you are the author of publications such as Islamic Ties, published in 1995, and Arabic Persian Seals and Amulets in the British Museum, published in 2011. So I invited you to this conversation to discuss your research, which ranges from Arabic inscriptions to contemporary art. And we will talk about your book that you co-wrote with Natasha Morris and Charles Trips, entitled Reflections, Contemporary Art of the Middle East and North Africa, published by the British Museum Press in 2020. This is also the exhibition of the same name that was held at the British Museum in London from May to August 2021. So your book includes the collection of works, mainly on paper, from the British Museum and produced by artists from the Arab Islamic world, that is to say the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa, and Iran and Turkey. So can you tell us a bit more about the history of this collection and what was the purpose of the museum to form it?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you this afternoon. Of course, I'm a huge admirer of the Dalloul Art Foundation and the collection, and it's really a privilege for me to be talking with you here today. So thank you so much for inviting me. This collection of modern and contemporary Middle East art really, it goes back quite a long way in terms of the collection. First of all, I want to say that it's always been like 90% paper. So that is the kind of the big focus of the collection. And that is, in a sense, what sets it apart from other collections, perhaps, is that we don't collect, although we do have one or two, oil paintings and, all the rest. Installation, we definitely don't collect installation. So essentially, the British Museum started to make this collection quite a long time ago, towards the end of the 1980s, and so there was this idea at that time. It was one of the previous directors about how can one make a bridge between the Islamic art collections and the present day. Like, what is there? He was asking these questions actually not just for the cultures of the Middle East and of the cultures of Islam as well, but of other areas like China and India and so on. So in terms of instead of my working on the Middle East, it was this question of can one form some kind of bridge? And if you think, now there are museums, there are auction houses focusing on Middle Eastern art, there are collections everywhere, obviously, including your own there. But if you think back to the end of the 1980s, actually, it was very difficult to find out what was going on. If you were not in Lebanon or Cairo or Damascus, of course, everybody there knew exactly what was going on. But,
Yes.
for those that are sitting on this side, as it were, it was sort of very, very, very difficult to know what direction, what was out there, and so on. So the first works that we acquired with this kind of notion of a bridge, which actually I'm so against now, but anyway, that's kind of right at the beginning, were works which were really had Arabic script, Arabic calligraphy, and these works, sometimes you would get works in kind of wonderful Arabic script. Sometimes it connected to the tradition, sometimes it didn't. So the first works we collected, actually, and that was not me, that was one of my predecessors, were a set of 6 prints by the renowned Egyptian artist calligrapher Ahmed Mustafa. So that's how it started, essentially.
Yeah. And then, so as I previously said, in 2006, the exhibition Word into Art, Artists of the Modern Middle East took place at the British Museum. And after this exhibition, the group Contemporary and Modern Middle Eastern Art was founded in 2009. Can you tell us about this group and what was its initiatives? What were its initiatives concerning the acquisitions, etc.?
Well, so what happened with Word into Art, and why it was important that the British Museum should do this, was that what we wanted to do was to showcase this collection that had been acquired, you know, as I mentioned, from the end of the 1980s, really, and so we were able to show these works. We borrowed a few others, but it was the first time the British Museum had put this collection on display. And actually, it has to be said that not many museums were showing the art of the Middle East up until this point. I mean, it was through a very kind of narrow prism, if you like. It was about writing. So on the one hand, it was about calligraphy, but also I became very interested in when artists are just writing, because they can be writing poetry, their own poetry. They can be talking about politics and history and war, and in a sense, you could say that part of the exhibition, which was the 4th part of the exhibition, in fact, is what really led to then what the collection is now. So what happened at the end of Word into Art was that I came across this wonderful woman called Dounia Nadar, and she was brought to the exhibition by a mutual friend of ours, and she fell in love with the exhibition. And at the end of it, she said, well, you clearly need some help here to extend the collection. And so that was really the beginning of the patrons group. So that was in 2009, actually, that was established. And gradually we built up this group of people. We have about 20 of them now. And actually, it was their support and encouragement that really led to kind of changes in direction and a much greater ability to purchase.
Yeah. But so for you, why was it important to create this group?
Well, it was important to create this group because you know, like many institutions, you know, every institution needs support, and you know, frankly speaking, the support that came from the government initially had been going down and down and down, and to the point where museums were encouraged to try and raise their own money, to try and find, you know, their own money in order to kind of match it to what the government was doing, so that it meant there was no more money, or very, very little, for acquisitions, for example. So if you wanted to make an acquisition, then you needed external support. So that's why we started it. And I mean, this is that we are not at the British Museum unique in this regard, that it's, you know, pretty well every museum is like this.
Yeah. In your book, you wrote that the former director of the British Museum, David Wilson, wondered about considering modern and contemporary art of the Arab Islamic region as, I quote, another phase in the story of Islamic art. Can you explain us the definitions of this Islamic art and Arab art?
Oh, that's a very big question. Well, in terms of Islamic art. I mean, it's one of these terms that is very complicated and a bit of a misnomer, really. But we're stuck with it. Unfortunately, this was a term that was kind of invented by pretty well European scholars who first came across the materials, the glorious material from. When they started to go on their travels from the kind of 19th century onwards, really. But the essential thing is whatever problems we have with the term, what it essentially describes is the art and material culture of a region which literally goes from Nigeria in the west right up to Southeast Asia and even China. And under that umbrella of Islamic world, one can say that this is where Islam is the significant religion, not the only one, of course, but it's where there was also an associated political, artistic culture as well. So, of course, all the people who were not Muslims, all had their role to play in this vast region. So these definitions, this kind of definition really covers that material from the beginning of the Islamic era, from the 7th century, right up to the 19th century. And there is the point, the 19th century. But what people who started to study it began to see was that there is a certain language, a kind of vocabulary that can be said to characterize the art of this region. And that is, there's a lot of beautiful calligraphy, there's a lot of geometry, arabesque design. There are issues around figural representation, although it's not nearly as cut and dried as people think. But even though there are clear divergences between what you might see, for example, in Syria in the 12th century and in Iran in the 12th century, there are enough similarities to be able to talk about this as kind of, well, under one umbrella. So that's the first thing in terms of the definition. Now, it's quite complicated, this thing of when scholars began to think, well, when does this actually end? So if you look at most books on Islamic art, from the kind of 19th century ones up until actually quite recent ones, you'll see that everything is perceived to stop in the mid 19th century because they think that there wasn't anything interesting happening after that, that it's all pastiche, and you might get a bit of revivalism here and there, but essentially you can kind of call it a day as to that. So, but of course that is so completely untrue, because art continued to be made in all of these regions, in all of these different parts of the Islamic world. I mean, of course, what I'm concerned about is something much more narrow in terms of the modern and contemporary art, not the broader Islamic world. So, in all of these regions, there was art being produced. Sometimes it was revivalist, sometimes it was continuing things, but then there lots of different things started to happen. The beginnings of modernism, as you might call it. But even before then, the whole way that you get academic style painting, in Iran or in different parts of the world. So it was really that kind of what David Wilson was trying to encourage us to think about was, were there contemporary manifestations that made these links to the past then?
Yeah. And according to you, how are Islamic art and Arab art are related to each other? Because in your book, you talk about you choose a specific word, a rupture between traditional Islamic art and what we can call modern art. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yes, I mean, yeah, thank you for these really interesting questions. I mean, there is definitely a rupture can be seen to happen when you got artists from, across the Middle East and North Africa going to study in Western art schools, or if you want to go even a little bit before that, you see that, that it was under the Ottomans, that the fact that they started making these big topographical drawings, paintings, was different from what was before. So there is definitely a rupture occurring in the 19th century. You're getting academic style painting influenced by the West there. So what, if you think of what was painting up until that stage, what you've got for the most part is what is sometimes called miniature painting, in very traditional styles, in which you find particularly, in Persian art, or in, the arts of the Ottoman, they were doing wonderful paintings, also in Arab countries as well. You go back to the maqamat of Hariri, made in Baghdad in the 13th century. So what the rupture is, in my view, is where you have artists who are using different kinds of materials, different formats, different scales. And a lot of that is actually where you have artists who are going to study in the West, and who are learning all of these different techniques and styles. And the thing that is interesting then, of course, is what happens when they come back and how they apply these techniques that they've learned to creating, whether it's an Iraqi art or a Turkish art or whatever. That this thing about Arab art, it's quite difficult, this kind of terminology, Middle Eastern art, Arab art. When you think of Arab art, you're talking about how many countries is it? It's about 20 over 20 countries, where Arabic is the thing that links everything together. So I've had very interesting debates with, for example, Nada Shabout about this, who is very clear that there is an Arab art. And I respect her position, absolutely, because what she says is that particularly if you think of after 67 and so on, that there are kind of preoccupations across the Arab lands, which to do obviously with things like 1967, which are preoccupations that then are reflected in the arts. I think it is an important view, but I myself would prefer us to be just thinking about the nationality of those artists, or places where they, so an artist who is a Palestinian, or an artist who is Syrian or Iraqi or Tunisian. So because I don't know, I find myself a little bit uncomfortable with these kind of blanket headings, really.
So you'd prefer to say an artist from Syria, from Egypt, rather than an Arab artist?
Well, I think so.
Yeah.
I think I would. I might say so from Syria. It's like, especially now with so many people moving around all the time. Sometimes an artist may be from Syria. Think of Marwan, for example. Okay, Marwan is an absolute case in point here, because he left in 1957 because there was no art school, as you know. He wanted to study abroad. He wanted to go to the Beaux-Arts, but he was unable to do that. It was difficult to go to Paris at that time. He ended up in Berlin. Now, for most of his life, although he did go back to Syria, of course, he was regarded as a German artist. Huh?
Yeah.
He was regarded as a German artist, and it's only relatively recently that he's been kind of, in inverted commas, claimed as an Arab artist or a Syrian artist. And so this is big question. What is he? And actually, does it matter?
Yeah. You talked about these artists, these student artists who went to Europe to study, and then they went back to their countries. In the 20th century, many debates were raising concerning the artistic identities through the countries of the Middle East. And one of them was about reconnecting the artists and their artworks to their respective past in order to create a modern art. In 1951, the Baghdad Group of Modern Art was founded, so in Baghdad. And in 1963, the movement of the Sakahane was founded in Tehran. So we have here one example from Jawad Salim and another one from Parviz Tanavoli. Can you explain us this notion of seeking inspiration from tradition and how it developed, especially with these two movements?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting thing, because you can also add Sudan into this story as well when you think of, Ibrahim Salahi, studying in an art school in London and then going back to Sudan and nobody liking the art that he had learned and then creating this kind of wonderful form of African modernism. So it's definitely I think it's a very interesting thing, and you see it with the two images that you've chosen here. So I think both Iraq and Iran are a very interesting case here.
Yeah.
So in Iraq, what was happening was exactly as you say, that these artists were being sent abroad, that they came back, and very early on, these debates started happening. What is an Iraqi art? And so they developed this really interesting idea, which I actually have been. I now think about this in terms of all of the art that I look at from this region. This Istilham al-Turath. So what it actually means is that when you're looking for inspiration, at least that's how I understand it, like everything is on the table. So you can be equally inspired by a Sumerian sculpture that is in the National Museum in Baghdad, or a work which has got folklore designs, or a work which has Arabic script in it, is that everything is there for you to play with, to inspire you. And I think it's very significant that a lot of Iraqi artists were, as part of their studies, what their teachers did was they sent them to the museum. Go and study the Sumerian, Babylonian sculptures in the National Museum of Baghdad. And that's what they did. So when you look at these works by, for example, Diazawi is a very good example, or of course Jawad Salim, who with Shakir Hassan Said, they kind of developed this whole idea. You look at this drawing, and what you see are these kind of creatures there. You can see what you see when you see the whole of the Nasb al-Hurriya is this kind of monumentality. There's an inspiration from Guernica. People have often said this, but in terms of scale, what he was also inspired by were the kind of gates of Babylon, the monumentality of kind of the ancient arts of Mesopotamia, as it was called. And so he was using this kind of language. And it's also interesting that in this Nasb al-Hurriya, he's done it as though as a text, so it's kind of, you can read it from right to left. And so it's really interesting in talking to artists, as I have been doing, for example, to Walid Sitti, or very recently to Sadiq al-Faraji. This is what they did. So Sadiq al-Faraji, for example, describes, when he went to the Institute of Fine Arts and he went into he went into the studio, as it were, of Shakir Hassan Assaid, and it was full of, it was not only books, but it was full of little sort of replicas of sculptures from the Baghdad Museum. So he was seeing the breadth of this world, and Sadiq describes going to the National Museum in Baghdad and to drawing things, and you see this in his in the work that he made. And then you think of Dia Hazawi, I just mentioned, of course, a little bit like even the work that he makes now is extraordinarily interesting. You try and analyze it, and you see something, a kind of beautiful Sumerian sculpture, or you see something from Yemen, or you see all of this, and yet what is extraordinary about it is none of it is pastiche. All of this is literally, this is what artists do, which is so extraordinary, is that they'll just absorb everything around them, and then they create something. And so the Sakahane school in Iran, although it's really interesting, they're completely unconnected. Actually, they were doing the same kind of thing, but there it was more in terms of a kind of directive. So it was, people seeing all this kind of very abstract modern art being created as a result of these Iranians going and studying abroad. And this thing, were like, why, what is this? We don't understand what we're looking at. Why can't we have an art that in some way connects to our own culture, or Iranian culture? And so what you find is an incredibly innovative group of people who include Parviz Tanavali, Charles Hussein Zendarudi, and many of the others. And one of the things they're really inspired by, they spend a lot of time going to bazaars. They go to places where they find this kind of popular folkloric, these Shia texts, commemorating the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, for example, that you find them like in the form of posters and texts and other kinds of objects. They're looking at all of this. They're looking, when they go to the bazaars, they're finding locks and amulets and all of that. They get very into calligraphy as well, but they create something that is utterly modern and extraordinary. And Parviz Tanavali is absolutely exceptional in this regard. So his work has been called a kind of like a form of pop art, if you like, a kind of Iranian spiritual. I think it was Rosie Issa who coined the term, like a spiritual pop art. And so I think it's almost like a natural impulse, if you like. But what is so clever about it is the very, very innovative ways in which these artists have found this way of reclaiming, reshaping, making it their own.
But what would you say it was more a directive?
Well, I think it was directive, in maybe that's too strong a word, but it was very much, there was kind of critique in newspapers and that sort of thing in Iran in the kind of late 50s. I think, I forget the dates exactly, but it was people saying, we don't like what we're seeing. We don't like all this modern art. It doesn't have any connection to us. Make a connection to us. I think that was the kind of thing that the critics of art were saying, really.
Because of the political environment or religious influence?
I'm not sure. It that may have had something to do with it. I'm not sure. I think it's quite similar to the Iraqi situation. It's how do you make an art that is both modern and connects to you? Just to go back to Ibrahim Salahi, the example I didn't talk about really in the book, except just in the caption to the text that goes with the "By his will we teach the birds to fly" that is in the book. See, what happened with him was that he studied at the Slade, And so he then, 47, I think it was. So he then returned to Sudan with a lot of his kind of compatriots. You know, they were all really excited. They'd learnt all these new techniques. They were, you know, new materials and all that. They arrived, and it's very well documented and absolutely fascinating, this. They made these exhibitions, and people just came and said, what is this rubbish? You know, we don't understand. We don't know what you're doing here.
Yeah.
We can't connect it. We can't connect with it. And so Ibrahim and other artists were really dispirited by this situation. And what they did is that Ibrahim describes how he went on a kind of great journey with Tayyip Saleh and with other people, and they decided to rediscover Sudan. So they traveled all over, and they wanted to learn what is the art that people actually really love here.
Yeah.
If they don't like the stuff that we brought back from the Slade, what is it that they like? Okay, so then, you know, to cut a long story short, as it were, they, you know, that's how you would say that this kind of African modernism really started. You know, the Khartoum school with Othman Waki Allah making kind of incredible calligraphies that are very modern, but rooted in the tradition as well. And then, you know, Salahi and Shibrain and these other people, you know, go off in these amazing directions. But that's why it's called this kind of African modernism. So I think that it's that this is how I see it. I might be wrong, but I mean that's how I see it, is this kind of trying to understand your artistic past and how it's kind of relevant to you. Because that, you know, there's nothing worse for an artist is if you spend, you know, days and weeks and months, you know, making a piece of art, and then you put it in a show and everybody's going, what is this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, so yeah.